Thank you, Jordi. Thank you for taking me to your lunch break. We're here in a coffee place, which is a place you're regularly coming. What do you like about it?
Well, I think I like coffee places, first of all. I think that thinking with a coffee is one of the pleasures of life.
I
So
agree.
almost every day at some point I get out of the office, I walk a little bit, and then I typically come here with some kind of a notebook or something just to think a little bit. And sometimes I even, today, I bring some guests for my lunch break, and we just have more of an informal conversation, relaxed conversation where we exchange ideas.
Looking forward to that. Thank you. So, Jordi, you're doing research for 25 years, and I was wondering if you were not doing research, what would you be doing?
Before moving into the research world, I tried to work for a private company,
Okay.
for two private companies, as a programmer, right, as a software engineer. And to be honest, in the end, it was boring because you learn a lot during the first 6 months, and then somehow it's always the same process again and again, the same type of software application that you have to build, the same technologies. You move to another company, and then you repeat the process. But in the end, I really wanted to have something that could be really more challenging and more interesting. And I think that in these 25 years of research, I never got bored at all. So I think we are good on that.
So walking down the research path was really about having change and excitement and challenges every day.
And running into interesting people and having interesting conversations. Indeed, I was not planning to do the PhD when I was doing my degree on computer science, right? But again, it was more, okay, I learned things in a private company, but at some point, the magic disappears, and that's when I thought, okay, maybe if I do research, I start a PhD, then it's more interesting and there's more challenging, and indeed that was the case.
Where did your passion for software come from? You might remember that?
I do. I think one of the main reasons is that with software, basically you can build whatever you can imagine, also on your own. In the sense that you don't need a fancy, expensive equipment in a lab and in a biology lab with animals for the testing of this thing, right? It's you, just a desktop, at the time now a laptop, and you can really build whatever you imagine. And that, to me, is so powerful that really attracted me a lot.
But at some moment you thought, okay, something is wrong with the software, or the pace at which software is being built. Do you remember kind of a turning point where you said, okay, I have to change the way software is made?
I don't think at the beginning I had this vision, right? At the beginning, what I wanted is to create video games.
Okay.
And the first program I created were video games, so I learned a lot about how to display images in the screen, which at the time was much more complex than now, because I have to do some math calculations about how to do things. It was really a learning experience, and it was just a passion for creating things. Then, of course, I realized also quite quickly that I was not as good as a programmer as some of my colleagues. So then is when I started to think, okay, I have the ideas, I have the vision for what I want to build, but I'm not that good at building it like others, right? So this is where I really started to think how we can accelerate the development, how we can make it more accessible to less technical people, still technical, but less technical people.
Yes.
And this is basically what triggers most of my core research since the beginning, which is always how to democratize software development, how to provide tools to people so that they can create the software that they want.
Do you want to replace the developers?
No, but we don't have enough. So imagine that you are a company that you want to create a software system, a complex one, and you need to hire developers.
Yeah.
Where are you going to find those developers? It's very difficult to find. Ask any company, any consultancy company in Luxembourg, in Europe. Yeah. It's very difficult to find highly trained professional developers. So we need solutions. And the second best solution is not to eliminate them, but maybe make them first more productive so that they can create more with the same hours of time. Yeah. And also that sometimes you give the tools to the non-developers to do some adaptations, to do some small prototypes, to do some toy applications alone. Yeah. And then maybe for the complex ones, you still go to the professional, right? But again, it's more of not about replacing them, but just acknowledging that we don't have enough developers available, and we need to build a lot of software. Because everything today is about moving to the digital world, digital transformation. Yeah. So there's a need for developers that we need to replace maybe with AI developer, maybe with some other tools, right?
So your the Besser project, we're going to speak about it in a minute, is kind of your contribution solution to the missing talent that is existing in the software development field.
Exactly. Besser is building a low-code platform,
Yeah.
which means that basically you can create the software system that you want without writing yourself all the code of the system, right? That is called low-code. So it means that we acknowledge that it's still today impossible to create very complex applications completely in an automatic way. So there are still some parts that you need to code, but most of it can be automated. So data alone already basically enables having less developers creating better and more complex software.
Yeah.
And that's really the goal of Besser is to provide tools to design the software. And from those designs, you can automate the development of part of the software, a huge part.
So the Besser stands for better, smart software, faster,
Exactly.
right? Can we put this a little bit into smaller pieces to understand how this works? Starting with smart software. What is smart software?
Smart software is just acknowledging that today, any software that we want to build will embed some type of intelligence. Because it could be a chatbot on the front end, so to let visitors of your website to ask questions about the products. Could be something more a recommender system in the backend, so that when you buy a product in this in this e-commerce, you get some recommendation about similar products.
Okay.
And all these features require some intelligence. So basically, all the software that we are building today is what I call smart software. You could call it AI enhanced software, but it's acknowledging that there's always AI in the mix.
So, and when we're speaking AI, it's a very general term also. I think there is both machine learning and large language models in Besser. Maybe just start by just giving a brief explanation of what is machine learning and what is large language models, and then maybe an example of how this flows into Besser.
Yeah. So basically, I would say that we have seen a very quick evolution of what is artificial intelligence in the last years.
Yeah.
And we have several tools in terms of types of artificial intelligence that you can use depending on what you need. So we can have what is called neural networks for solving concrete tasks. And these are basically components that are trained to perform a classification problem or to perform really a very concrete and narrow task very quick. Or you can go to the other extreme and use the ChatGPT, which is the most famous example of a large language model, which is really a massive neural network trained on millions of data points, where basically has a more general purpose skill. So you ask any type of question, summarization, translation, image generation, and it will be able to provide this type of feature. So it's more flexible, but it's more dangerous in the sense that sometimes it hallucinates, sometimes it may give you some type of biased answer. So I think that when you need something concrete that runs fast and maybe run in your machine and doesn't need to depend on an external provider like OpenAI or one of these big companies, you can just train your neural network with machine learning and just run that. If you need something which is much more flexible and that is much more adapted to the demands of your clients, you may need to rely on a large language model.
So using your machine learning, is that adding on the security side and the trustworthiness of the software that is being built?
I would say that as soon as you enter in the artificial intelligence world, there's always a risk.
Yeah.
Because it's non-deterministic, meaning that the way that artificial intelligence works is that it gives you an answer. But if you ask again the same question, it may give a different answer, which is something that we were not used to see in computer, right? The computer was always very deterministic. There's a set of steps.
Yeah.
If you follow the same steps, you get the same result. And now we live in a world where we have much more powerful capabilities thanks to the artificial intelligence, but at the risk of getting these different answers and sometimes even not the correct answer.
Yeah.
We can have this hallucination problem that we had said before, right?
Has the I call it from an outside perspective, the explosion of the generative AI tools since October 22-ish, something like that, had an impact on your research and also on the project itself?
A lot. Because one of the most fashionable activities of people today is what they call vibe coding, which means that basically you don't write the code yourself, but you just explain to the machine, to the artificial intelligence, what you want the artificial intelligence to build for you, and then you get the code automatically generated.
Yeah.
And that's the risk, because I mean, if this application is just for you, for your own, laptop and just for whatever internal purpose, okay, maybe that's fine. But if you want to really use this application on the internet or with external people, it's a huge risk, because if you don't know how to code, you cannot even evaluate the quality of the code generated by the artificial intelligence. And therefore you have all the security risk, all the privacy risk, and that's basically introducing a lot of, generating a lot of, say, poor software into the world, right? So, but at the same time, we have now people that understand that they can use AI to create applications. So we cannot just tell them not to use AI and use Besser, right? Because then they will say, yeah, okay, Besser will produce a better code, but I need to manually design the code I want. I need to use your application. Why I go to ChatGPT and I say, just build me a software system for human resource management, right? So what we have introduced in Besser is trying to combine the best of the best of both worlds. Basically, what we promote now is what we call vibe modeling or vibe designing, which means that you can use AI to create the specification, the blueprints of the software system that you want. Like if you were, wanting to design your own house, you have your plot of land that you bought, and you want to design the house that you want to build in this land, right? So you can use AI to help you to design the blueprints, the specification of this house, and then you can revise this blueprint, right? Because it's easier to revise or to verify a model, a design, than the actual code. Maybe you don't know how to code, so having hundreds of lines of code is just too difficult. I mean, you don't understand anything, but if there's some kind of a blueprint, high-level view of what the system is going to do, you understand that. So you use AI to create your blueprints in Besser. It's integrated. So you have a chatbot in the Besser editor that you can explain what you want, and the chatbot will help you to create the blueprint of your system. You validate your blueprint, and then you generate the code from this blueprint. And this code is high quality, because this code is not generated by AI, it's generated by ourselves, right? Okay. So we try to really combine the best of both worlds. Again, it's like you're using an AI to help you to design your house, the house of your dreams. But then it's not the AI that builds the house, because then it could hallucinate, create a new bedroom where you wanted a toilet. Just give the plans to an actual construction crew that will actually build the house.
But how much of an expert or non-expert can you really be to use Besser? Because if I get it right, you still need a minimum of understanding of what the platform is suggesting you and showing you, right?
So we are trying to, and it's a difficult challenge, we are trying to cover all the profiles. So for the somehow technical people that can at least understand a blueprint, we offer the low-code editor. But there's also the kind of the no-code version of Besser. And no-code, as the name implies, basically means that using this version of Besser, there's nothing you need to write in terms of coding.
Okay.
It's a drag-and-drop editor where you build your web page just by dragging and dropping the components that you want. Everything is visual, and you just click a button and you get the web application that you wanted.
So that is something that ideally even I, who has no knowledge of coding,
absolutely
could use.
Absolutely.
But you need a minimum of logical understanding of what you want to do.
Yes, and there are two things. Of course, if I eliminate completely the need for you to write any code, it means that I'm also reducing a little bit the scope. You are not going to build, the software for the next jet or rocket with that, right? Of
course.
But we are talking about typical and classical web applications with a database to store data, manipulate the data. So that's the first thing. No code means you have a certain exclusivity, but it's good for many people. And then you said, but I still need to be able to express in somehow a logical way what I want. But I would say that this capability, which is called computational thinking, it's something that everybody should have. right? Because in our lives, I mean, in our lives, it's having the capacity to express in a somehow logical argumentation the steps to do something is something that everybody should be able to do, right? And probably should be even taught at the school level, right?
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that you are able to do that.
I'm trying to. It's very difficult, but I'm now wondering. I mean, 5 years ago, schools were kind of like asked to submit coding classes also to the kids. Is this something that is still necessary? If I see the development where you go and where tools are being developed that enable you to have no coding knowledge, is that still relevant then?
Absolutely, yes. Right. So my daughters, they learn Scratch at the school, which again is this block-based language, very visual, that you just connect blocks that do different things and then you solve a problem. And to me, again, this capability of problem solving translates to many aspects of your life, not just programming. If they need to think about how to face any type of challenge in their life, they need to be able to know that a big challenge can be decomposed into smaller challenge, that then they can be done in parallel or maybe in sequence, depending on the type of challenge, that the challenge can be, again, reduced to a number of steps, of different types of steps. And all this, to me, doing on a program is just a way to help them to test their computational skills faster, right? Because then you click the button, you see whether you were right or wrong, and it gives you an immediate feedback. But that applies to life. And even if we can think that artificial intelligence will be part of our life, I believe that there's still a role for thinking.
So the human side is not completely disappearing neither in the project here.
I mean, I think that human always needs to be in the loop, right? And that's exactly the terminology they use in artificial intelligence, this human in the loop, because it means that you always need to be supervising. And of course, the more important is the task that you rely on the AI to do, the more you need a human to keep an eye on the solution, right?
So now we are a little bit where we're kind of 2 years into the project, more or less.
2 years and a half.
The platform is online. If now, today, tomorrow, a small business or a public service would like to use Besser, what would they realistically get now, and what would still be research that is needed?
I think we have advanced a lot. I mean, if you had asked me this question 6 months ago, I would have given you a different answer, right? Because now, as I said, we have introduced also this no-code version and an online editor, which means that now to use Besser, you don't need to install anything.
Okay.
Because that was a barrier to entry, right? Because you needed to install Python, which means that you already knew what was Python, and you need how to install Python packages, so it's already more complicated. But right now, no. Right now, you just go to a URL of the editor Besser, and then you can immediately start designing your system, and then you generate. What we don't have yet is a way to automatically, let's say, take the code that is generated by Besser and deploy it on a server, so that you don't even need to see what is generated, right? That you really go from the design to something that is running somewhere that you can immediately use. Okay. And that's something that we are working on. But again, it's a lot of this is a lot of engineering effort, not so much research. On the research side, what we are, I think, is all the support for AI components. So how can you use Besser to create not only standard applications, but also these chatbots, these agents, so that you can now create also your own agent that represents you and that does things for you. So how you model this agent, how you give power to this agent in a controlled way, right? Because maybe you want the agent to buy tickets for you or you buy the next flight. Right? So there's a lot of concerns about how you create these agentic systems. And that's why we are doing now, focus more on the research part. Okay.
So as you said, the Besser is already accessible on by URL, so there are users. Has there been some kind of like more surprising feedback that you already got from users, and also how do you feed back the feedback you're getting from users into the engineering and into the research process?
So I famously say in the first annual revision of the project, where we have the scientific advisory board that come, that we would never add a no-code version of Besser, right? So because at the time I felt that we wanted to focus more on the low-code part and be very powerful with that. And the market basically showed me that we needed the no-code part. And not only the market in terms of people that we were showing Besser, but also we did an analysis of the competitors. And we realized that all the famous competitors had this no-code. So again, the market was very clear that we needed to make it even more accessible to the people, right? So then we basically decide to redirect part of the engineering effort to create this no-code version of Besser. And honestly, we learn a lot the best way to learn is by seeing how somebody is using Besser, even in education. So we try to really push a lot Besser into all the software engineering courses, because then you have all these people that have never used this type of tools that try to use it, and they have all sorts of problems when using it, and that's really helpful.
5 years from now, what would be success for Besser?
Really, a success for me is impact, and for me, impact means really users. People actually and companies using Besser, right? But we could talk about scientific publications and maybe patents. Okay, Besser is open source, so by the way, so basically everybody can use it for free. And we're really trying to democratize the access to software development. So to me, the best measure of success is how many people will be using Besser to create their systems.
So, and the open source part is very core to your heart also. You really, this is a principle that you don't want to change. So no monetization of the tool afterwards, even if competitors.
I think that, again, that's something that people tend to confuse, that the fact that it's open source means that there's no business model behind it. We don't have a business model today, right? Because we are still in development, but both things are compatible.
Okay.
It means that the code is open, everybody can use it, and even can modify it, and they can install it without paying anything. But typically companies, they want support, they want some specialization. So if a company wants to use Besser, typically they will want to adapt Besser, or the way that Besser generates code to the way they code in the company, which is following the styles of the company. So there's a lot of opportunity for building an ecosystem of companies that provide professional services on top of Besser.
In that relation, why is the project, and with the project also the topic, important to Luxembourg?
Well, first because, again, there's this shortage of developers, and if you go to the official stats of the jobs that are more demanded in Luxembourg, software development is always there, right? So I think that for a small country like Luxembourg, having the opportunity to enable all the people, all the companies of Luxembourg to create better systems for being more efficient themselves in a context where they are not able to import even, right, these software developers, it's key for the critical, for the digital transformation of the country.
So at some point, can you possibly give an example of how a small company or public service could concretely use Besser?
Imagine that you have an idea, right? You have an idea of a software that you believe has a lot of potential, but you are not a developer. So again, how you go from your idea to at least a prototype that you can show, that you can test, and you can see whether there's some traction in the market. Without Besser or tools like Besser, these no-code tools, basically the only option would be for you to partner with a developer if you find it, and then already start splitting the shares of the company. So it's a much more complex process. I would say that with Besser, and of course this vibe modeling part of Besser, you can explain your idea to our chatbot. The chatbot will produce some type of model that then you can elaborate and quickly get an up and running application. Again, not scalable, not maybe completely secure, but something that you can show and get feedback. Because the feedback that you get by showing something, it's much different than when you just show a PowerPoint, right?
You got the Pearl grant, a bigger grant. What did Pearl make possible that would not have been possible with a smaller grant?
I think that there are two key factors, right? One is the total amount that allows you to create, not just pay for 1, 2, 3 postdocs, but to create a team. A team that involves also not only researchers, but engineers. Because as we said, right, I mean, if we want people to actually use what we produce in the Pearl, it means that we need to put some effort in usability, accessibility, all these things that are not directly research, but that people actually requires to actually use the tool. And the second point is that the longer, because most projects are short, 2, 3 years, instead the Pearl is 5, which gives you a much more time to actually not only produce the research, but also mature the tool, validate it, and have the time to try to find the users, get them on board, and get their feedback. I think both aspects are very important.
Not long ago, you published a second book about tips, and you would like to share also with younger researchers. So you have your 25 years of experience. You're leading the team. What sort of learnings would you like to share with students, PhDs, and also maybe young entrepreneurs?
I mean, I think it's really part of my job as well, right? And I guess maybe other colleagues may disagree, but I think that my job is not only to produce research, but to produce researchers, right? And I really believe that, again, once you have certain experience, you can really do a lot of mentoring and make sure that you are helping the next generation of researchers that will be the ones producing the research when you are already retired, right? So I take this as a really important part of my job. When I say the book, it's just a matter of, I try to mentor those that are close by, but I think that my expertise could also help others that are not very linked to me. And that's why I wrote the book. And in the book, basically what I try to do is to really write down lots of advices that I give typically to my people in a way that it's easy to read and to digest. But indeed, I think that one of our social missions is really to produce and train and mentor the next generation of researchers.
One very last question. If you could have one way to change tech culture today, if there's, is there anything that you would say, okay, this has to change or needs to be done differently?
The tech culture or the research culture?
Well, let's both. Let's have research culture first and then tech culture.
Research culture, the issue, but I don't have the solution. So I know the problem, but I don't have the solution, is how we are evaluated. Because this really, as soon as you put some metrics in place, obviously every researcher will try to optimize for those metrics. If the metric is number of publications, then you get suddenly people trying to publish a lot of papers, most of the time papers that are just slightly incremental with what they have done before, because that counts as a new paper, right? And I think that I would like to have metrics which are more oriented again towards impact in a more broader perspective. How your research is actually impacting and improving society. I know that, again, there's not an easy metric for that and depends a lot on the field, but I would really like to have a research that is more oriented towards some positive impact more than, how many papers did you publish, right? And in terms of the tech culture, well, what do you mean by tech culture, right? So,
generally speaking, the evolution that we have seen over, especially speaking about the tech development we have seen over the past 2-3 years and how much impact actually technology has on our everyday lives and has presence also in decision making that we are taking.
Yeah. So my advice to everybody would be that every person should spend a few hours every week playing with all these new AI tools that are popping up. Because, again, we live in a bubble of people that are really used to play with ChatGPT and somehow knowledgeable of these tools. But there's many more people that basically never try it and are not understanding, in my opinion, the strong impact that these tools will have in their daily life, also in the professional, but also in the personal life. So first, I would really ask everybody to book some time to play with things and see how far they can go. Again, based on what they do at work and trying to see maybe if these tools can work, can help or not, but also on their personal life. And then on the other side, we need also to tame the expectations because, again, we go from the people that never use them to the people that believe that, there's no need for developers anymore because you can buy code anything. And for them, I think we need to make sure that they understand the risks of using AI, right? Of these biases, hallucinations, because otherwise you have the risk to become a bit of extremist in the sense that you start overusing these tools, you start believing that these tools are always right, and then you lose your own criticism, your own capacity to discern what is good and it's not. So there are two both extremes, so you need to find always the virtues in the middle, right?
Balance. Perfect. I think that's a good end to our discussion. Thanks so much, Jordi. I think we have plenty more things that we could discuss, but you're here for at least the Pearl is still for 3 years, right?
Hopefully more than that.
And then more than that,
hopefully
and
more.
Other projects we can talk about. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can now finish the coffee.
Yeah.